The boat with the man on board bobbed quietly on the waves, shrouded in a thick fog that severely limited visibility. The man was Captain Baipuchi. He was anxious to get to the meeting place with his apprentice as quickly as possible. The man had been wounded in battle, and his wound was laced with poison. He had miraculously escaped instant death and was trying his best not to lose consciousness. In his hands, the captain clutched a golden plaque. His apprentice, Haddon, did not believe in his mentor's words. However, Baipuchi now had solid proof. Suddenly, he saw the silhouette of a ship ahead. Baipuchi couldn't imagine anyone else who could get out to sea in this weather besides her. The man squinted his eyes to make out the deck of the ship behind the shroud of fog. On the ship indeed stood Shinny, battle friend in the past and enemy in the present. The woman smiled slyly as she looked at the boat her acquaintance was sailing in. Shinny decided to try once again to convince her comrade of the futility of his scheme. She wanted to end their confrontation as soon as possible. The warrior was unwilling to listen to the threats that came off her lips. He knew full well who this woman was and what she had become. Shouting curses at his acquaintance, the man coughed. He tried to appear brave, even though he knew he was no longer able to stand up to her and survive. The woman recognized that he had made many efforts, but they were in vain. She again suggested that he resign himself to his fate, promising that if he did so, Mr. Jucho would be kind to him. Shinny's words made the man angry, and he called her a power-hungry traitor. She didn't deny it, just grinned, and a sly smile played on her lips. The woman said the world was changing, the era of Mr. Jucho had arrived, and she was simply adjusting to the new reality. Baipuchi knew that their unit, Suratsu, had been defeated by those traitors, but his acquaintance decided to press him by reminding him of that. Once upon a time, he and Shinny had been on the same side and strived for the same goal, but those times were behind them. Now the woman had no affection for her former co-worker. The man gathered the last strength of his weakened body and delivered a final blow, hoping to crush his opponents. A wave of power enveloped Baipuchi and rushed towards the deck of the enemy ship. The woman was surprised, certain that the warrior had exhausted all his strength and was now completely harmless. The man's face contorted with rage, pain, and despair. He was anxious to put an end to their pointless conversation and no longer had any hope for his survival. A powerful wave of force shattered the stern of the ship. The planks broke one after another, turning into useless splinters. There was panic on the ship, people were rushing around the deck, and the woman was furious. How wrong she was to think that the warrior had no more strength left. Recognizing her mistake, Shinny decided that negotiations with an old acquaintance had failed, and ordered her mercenaries to kill the man. The events of this story take place in the kingdom of Han, in the province of Nama. It was beginning to be a beautiful sunny day. A simple village boy named Jinbeek lives by the seashore with his little sister and a very strict grandfather. Today he is forbidden to leave the house, but his desire to enjoy the beautiful morning is stronger than any inhibitions. So he carefully opened the door and slipped out into the yard. He moved through the yard with the caution and grace of a forest cat, stepping silently from foot to foot. He had done this trick many times before, knowing all the nooks and crannies and safe routes to avoid detection. It wasn't enough, however, because his sister spotted him and asked him where he was going. Jinbeek was confused, not expecting anyone to catch his escape. He turned around and smiled widely at his sister. Midden reminded her brother that his grandfather told him to stay home and he decided to run away again. Jinbeek began to tell his sister that he hadn't intended to run away at all. He explained that Baekbong's father had passed away, and he was on his way to support his friend. The girl reproachfully remarked that he had already given that reason last month, and his brother could come up with something new. This time, the sister was determined not to let Jin back out of the house. She knew Grandpa would be angry, and her brother had no real reason to leave the house. But Jin Bak wouldn't be himself if he didn't try to find a way out. He decided to bribe his sister by promising to buy her a beautiful mirror at the bazaar, hoping it would convince her to let him go out. To really persuade Midden, he offered to pick up some candy for her on his way home. The girl had a real sweet tooth, so she started to hesitate. When his sister gave him 3 hours of free time, the guy hurried to the exit. But without looking up from the road, he crashed into something or someone very large. Jin Bak rubbed his nose in amazement. A giant man towered in front of him. It was their grandfather, who was looking at his grandson with a scowl of menace. The latter was about to break the ban once again. The boy realized that this time his grandfather would not forgive him and looked at him fearfully. It was clear that the grandfather was seriously angry and started yelling at him, reproaching him for wasting his time. The man wanted his grandson to benefit the family, and if he couldn't stay put, why didn't he start hunting like he was doing himself? The grandfather was angry, grabbed a stick and decided to educate his grandson using time-honored methods. Jin Bak avoided the blows as best he could, trying to convince the man that hunting wasn't his passion and he didn't want to do it at all. Toward nightfall, the boy did make his way out of the house and headed for the sea. Sitting on the sand, he reflected on his life. Jin Bak thought that his grandfather was too strict on him. After all, he was no longer a little boy. Being born into this world, he wanted to live an amazing life, not spend his days the way he did now. In his dreams, he saw himself as a great warrior, traveling the world and performing feats. He dreamed of becoming a hero, of leaving his mark on history. As he traveled the earth, he would inevitably gain fame, exploring different corners of the world and putting all the villains in their place. His name would remain in people's memories, and the thought made his heart beat faster, rising to his feet with excitement. He could have met a lady, saved her from a dastardly assailant, and she would have admiringly dubbed him her savior, wanting to know his name. Modestly he withdrew, thinking his name too modest for such a recognition. But she insisted, and eventually he confessed that his name was Fire Dragon of the Jin Bak Heavenly Army. This would be the beginning of the legend of the great warrior Jinbeak, so dreamed this young man. Suddenly, a wave washed over him. It was so unexpected that Jin Bak didn't have time to react. The emotion of the wave came with it, and in his wet clothes, his dreams didn't seem so vivid. Dazedly looking at the shore, Jinbeak noticed the body of an unknown man. His face was scarred and scratched. The boy was scared to the core. People weren't thrown out of the sea every day, and this was a first for Jin Bak. From the man's breast pocket protruded a golden plaque on a red ribbon with incomprehensible symbols. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave comments to help the new video come out as soon as possible. Have a great day.